Welcome to Teach Simple Podcast, where we focus on providing simple solutions in the classroom. Teach Simple, a podcast that believes simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. We're dropping gems, family. My brother Calvin Ellum is keeping it simple for the culture. Education, politics, science, physics, he's talking about it all. Just keep it simple for our brother, man. Teach Simple Podcast. Enjoy, family.
Welcome to the Teach Simple Podcast. We focus on providing simple solutions in the classroom. I got my brother Desmond Williams with me today. He's in the PG County, DMV area. I got my Falls Church, Virginia, Maryland, DC brother. You know, I grew up in Virginia, so whenever we used to play basketball, everybody used to think we were soft. So whenever DC,
shout out to Grant Hill.
Right. So we always had to, prove ourselves. And that's kind of like where I feel like I learned how to not be scared and, go against people, basketball in the DMV area. But man, what's up, Desmond? How you doing today, man?
No, it's all good because I grew up in Detroit, right? So coming out here to the DMV, particularly my experience at Howard that first month.
Yeah.
Meeting so many Black people from different walks of life, I felt the need to prove myself because everybody at Howard wasn't a first generation college student, and I was.
Wow.
So I was trying to figure out how I fit into that world. So it's literally opposite sides of the same coin. I mean, basketball is not the equivalent of academics, but when you think about like identity, right, and how I fit in here, there's this proving ground that you have to jump into when you move into a new space,
right,
into a new environment. So
yeah,
it's all good. It's all
absolutely,
good.
Absolutely. And if you listen to J. Cole album, like even after you get the $1 million, you still got to be on the grind, still push yourselves, and I just always love reflecting back when I was a kid and looking at where I'm at now and just seeing how much I've accomplished. And I'm just happy to have you on the podcast with us today, man.
Yeah, that dude is on fire. Speaking of J. Cole, I had to. It's funny because I think this is the album that's the tipping point for me because I have all of his work and I don't listen to him a lot. But my buddy's a DJ. He was like, "Yo, this new J. Cole is on fire." So I went straight to YouTube, but I listened to the freestyle he did on something. I don't even know where he was at. I was like, "Oh my God!" And I listened to the album like 4 times. It's not real long.
Yeah.
I was like, this is a tipping point for me and J. Cole. So he's officially in my pantheon now. As an old head, he's officially in my pantheon now.
Absolutely. Shout out to J. Cole. And again, shout out to all the teachers. We're gonna get teacher tip of the week. You all are literally holding on to your last energy that you have. A lot of teachers turn their cameras off. I know, they're just trying to get through the day. I guess my teacher tip would be, again, just finish strong. Finish strong so you can start the next year off stronger. Recognize the importance of following through, right? And if you do have your camera off, be honest with your students. Be like, listen, today's not my day, but we're going to get through it, and just kind of break that ice because I can definitely tell you that your kids have been feeling like that. And it's okay for them to relate, it's okay for them to relate to you, because you're human. What about you, bro? What's a teacher tip that you think, you want to give out there?
For today at this time of year, I think my teaching tip, Calvin, is we've been through worst, and lesser caliber people have done it. So when you look at teachers last year, school year 2019-2020, we never thought we would get through April, right? Yeah. People were crying for spring break, right?
Yeah.
We were crying Memorial Day at 8 o'clock at night when we had to go back to work the next day. We didn't know what that was going to look like. We were crying at that Labor Day night when the school year was starting the next day. But it's May, right? Lesser caliber people have done it. You just have to stay your course, even if you know this course is not the most efficient course for students. Anything they've gotten it from you, and they've gotten it from your peers and your colleagues. So do not sell yourself short. The battle scars, the fatigue, the long nights are for naught, because our kids are going to remember you.
Yeah, man. Like I said, their kids are never going to forget their COVID teacher, right? You know, they're definitely going to be able to distinguish between a teacher who literally sat on their butts for hours and hours and was trying to be as engaging as possible, only half of their body moving. Like, you imagine that? Like, we were literally we're just like half robots, just like doing stuff.
Puppet masters. It's like the Muppets and it's tough, but it's going to get better, because we have reimagined ourselves. It's like that team who's about to they're like, if I can give a football analogy, it's like they're about to beat the champion, right? And their quarterback throws a interception in the end zone, and it goes all the way the other way for a pick six. It's like teachers, particularly in the inner city, who are less resourced, they've really set themselves up to reimagine what school can look like for Black and brown children. And we should never go back to the old ways of kids sitting in their seats, teachers sitting in their seats. We never thought we could differentiate around environment. Now we do it, right? Like, I remember as a principal trying to convince teachers to let kids go in the hallway. They were like, Mr. Williams, you can't send kids in the hallway. It's like, dude, it's the hallway. Now they're learning in their bedrooms and their living rooms, at the dining room table, while you're in your living room, your bedroom, and your dining room table. So starting to differentiate over our process and our product and our content, I mean, that should be a no-brainer now, when we can differentiate over our environments.
Absolutely. So let's talk about you and your background, man. So you're from Detroit, I feel like someone always tell me, if you're from Detroit, you are a hard worker. And that's a prime example of, even if you don't have all the talent, your hard work can definitely give you success. And I think, Detroit, just, blue collar spirit is what attracted me to the city, because people, no matter what they do, no matter what they look like, no matter how much money they got, they're going to probably work hard, and do it really well every day. And they're still going to put a smile on their face. And, they might be like, move on my way if you in their way. But at the same time,
oh, yeah. Yes, sir.
They still going to, have peace. And that's one thing I really do love about Detroit. But just kind of talk about like your upbringing, and how did, what did Detroit influence the education, or was it a different region, or what was it like just growing up in Detroit?
No, so I grew up in the city, born on the east side, but grew up on the west side off of Greenfield and Schoolcraft.
Okay.
Shout out to the Shake Shop and Max Car Wash and Lewis Barbershop. But definitely that blue collar ethic. My mother was a hairdresser. My father worked for Cadillac and for General Motors for 37 years. Put me through everything, right? Put me through undergrad at Howard. Et cetera. So, we went to school every day, right? There were no off days. There were no snow days, right? School was my job. And I was pretty good at it until about ninth grade. I went to high school at Detroit Cass Tech, which is probably still one of the top 150 high schools in the country, and definitely one of the top high schools in the state. But I went to Detroit Cass Tech, and it's interesting in retrospect, because my parents were pretty hands off. Like, I spent a lot of time alone, and because I was just good in school to a point. We never really had conversations about school and college and, what's going to happen after high school and things like that. But long story short, I had a run-in with a teacher in ninth grade, and I let her redefine me. And I didn't do anything the rest of my time in high school. I finished high school with a GPA just a little bit over a 2.0. I had like a 2.01.
Yeah.
Went to junior college, got my swag back, and it wasn't until years later that I realized the impact that that teacher had on me and what traumatic experience that was. But went to junior college. The only schools I really wanted to go to were Michigan and Florida State and Howard.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm gonna go to Howard because Florida State was just too far, in Michigan.
What's up, families? Mr. Nallo. We are back with the COVID-19 vaccine vlog number 2. All right, and as you can see, I'm still here. All right. Side effects again after taking the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine. Again, it's a couple tingling in the toes and the extremities. I slept pretty well. Woke up with a lot of energy. So that's my update. And let's give a couple of facts about the Moderna vaccine. You can find this in the CDC if you go to CDC frequently asked questions for the Pfizer vaccine, CDC frequently asked questions for the Moderna vaccine. There are a lot of facts that talks about the side effects, and again, kind of like what I told you, pain, swelling, usually in the part that you got the shot in, redness maybe in that spot that you got a shot in, chills, tiredness, headaches. But if you're allergic, right, they ask you those questions before so you can prepare. But anyways, I really appreciate you all, tuning in to the first video. I really think this is going to be a really cool journey as we learn about this vaccine, and I'm doing it for y'all. So check out the new episode, MC Nice. He dropping jewels, dropping raps, dropping poems. I hope you all like it. Peace out.
Was just not hollering at a brother with a 2.01 GPA out of high school. So
Exactly.
Went to Howard. I knew I wanted to be a teacher and jumped into that pretty quickly, majoring in human development and English. And from that perspective, being a classroom teacher was history. But that's kind of the story of, being in education. But it was, one of those things that was I grew up in a war zone, and it was pretty clear to me early on, you're either going to go to the military, you're going to get caught in the streets and get shot doing something you weren't supposed to do, or be in the wrong place at the wrong time and get shot, or you're going to parlay the books. And I thought I had equal chances of being successful at either of them, but school seemed to be the least violent of the three. So I went the school route. Then that's kind of how that went.
Yeah, we're happy that you are on our side, man, because we are in competition. Teachers, educators, we're in competition, with social media. We're in competition with, pop culture. We're in competition with the streets. We're in competition with so many things that have our kids' attention. We want to make sure that we are redirecting them in the right way. But let's elaborate on that a little bit more. So what do you think is something that, schools kind of fail at with addressing those certain dynamics, right? Those socioeconomic dynamics, those dynamics where you have poverty and criminality, and it's systemic and it's chronic. And, I recently watched White Boy Rick, and it talked about some of the corruption, in the city of Detroit, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and in the back of my head, I just kept thinking like, you know, like y'all doing all this stealing, but like, what about the people? Like, what is the aftermath of the people? How are the people going to be affected, you know, by these selfish acts? And I don't think just because you're black, you can't be corrupt, right? You know, it's just a corrupted mind. You understand what
Oh
I
yeah.
mean? And so, what do you think? And maybe it's not maybe the school's responsibility, because I think maybe we put too much responsibility on the teachers. But like, what is the problem, right? You know, we're talking about what's going on with Israel and, you know, and Palestine, you know, but we can say the same thing about, you know, the west side, east side of Detroit every night, you know, like things be popping off every day, you know. And so, like, how do we, you know, like what can an educator do about that? Or like, what do you have to say about that, you know?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, but I would start by saying um, we shouldn't. I don't necessarily agree with you, Calvin, that we're in competition with the streets, because if we are, racism is in competition with the streets. What the reason why so many of our children are attracted to the streets is because it feels like home, and school can't feel like home, even with black male educators and all of the things we say our schools need. You can't give schools part of what's needed, right? You can't give a school a 100% black male educator staff with a white Eurocentric curriculum, a white Eurocentric psychology, white testing instruments, and low pay. Like you're going to have a school full of children with black male educators who are going to be looking at uh, why are we here, right? A lot of what we see from our children is open rebellion. Like when I go into teachers' classrooms and kids are acting up, they are creating their own environment because the environment that they're creating is more stimulating than what's happening in schools. So I don't look at it as competition as much as um, what is it what is it about the streets that we can bring into the schools to make what we do for our students more relevant, more applicable to the degree that they can solve problems in their own community. And I
Yeah.
think that's where we fall short. Like we were before we started recording, we were talking about like algebra and geometry and a lot of the courses that we want our kids to take in high school. And those courses have their place, but they don't feel that way when you're 15 years old and you're thinking about the girl next to you who smells like
Yeah.
violets. It's like, man, she smells good. Why are we talking about side angle side, right? Like,
Yeah.
why does she smell like that? Right? Like,
Yeah.
there's so many other things that are happening. We have to find high school in this country just needs to be completely reimagined. If I had it my way, these corporations and these companies would be opening up their doors to co-ops and internships for our juniors and seniors, so that when we take our gap years, or even if we don't take our gap years, and kids are going off to college, they're more sure about what they want to do with their degrees when they finish. It's not an accident. I think I read in Fast Company, I may have the percentage wrong, but about 50, I think it was like 59% of college graduates are not working in a field related to their undergraduate degree. And that's because we don't give enough time for exploration. We ask kids, what do you want to do? But we don't ask them, like, who are you? And I
Right.
think for Black children, there's absolutely no identity building. As a matter of fact, their identities are being stripped, which is, again, makes you correct when you talk about we're in competition with the streets, but it's not. The streets are actually correct because they're building their identity. You could be one of us. We're gonna take care of you. We have your back. And if we see your mother walking down the street carrying groceries by herself, we're gonna help you. Whereas your teacher probably doesn't even know your mother, right?
Yeah.
So I think
Wow.
in that sense you're right, but the competition is we're on the wrong side of that competition as educators. Um, so we actually have a lot to learn from the streets in terms of how we educate and how we create belonging or what I called in the book MRAB, mutual respect and belonging for our children, particularly our boys, because your boys will create gangs in your classroom. Like this is our tribe, this is our fraternity, and we don't want to hear you talk about Greek philosophy and ancient religions and
Yeah.
none of that bullshit. We don't like. We're gonna sit here and talk about Teresa because she looked good today. Like that's what we gonna do. And Mr. Johnson, if you don't want to, Teresa looking real good today. You see her every day, just like we do. And if you don't want to talk about Teresa, then we're not listening to you. We talking about Teresa. That and that's school for a lot of Black and brown males, and that's school for a lot of children in general. Like there are lots of things in my life that are just more interesting.
Absolutely. So like, talk about like maybe like that worst or that teacher experience where it clicked for you. You're like, man, I need to switch this because you're a black male education, right? But we do know that just because you're a black male, that doesn't mean that you're going to be an effective educator, right? And so there's some deeper things that you need to discover about yourself and the relationships with your kids. So like, when did it click for you to have this level of empathy, right? When what was it, your first year, third year? When did it change? You're like, I need to start thinking.
Nah. So I became a principal at a very young age. I became a principal at 30, and I was a pretty good teacher. Like I learned how to teach reading very early as a special educator. Like I was good at it. I'm still really good at it. And I moved through the ranks, and I was working at a charter school, Calvin, and loved my principal, white gentleman by the name of Andrew Touchette. And I was an assistant principal. I actually left the principalship at a private special needs school and went to work at a charter school as an assistant principal. So it was kind of a demotion, but it was like an extra 15 grand. So I was like, I'm all in, right?
Yeah.
And I started July like 3rd or whatever the case may be. And my principal and I were fired together the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. And I was like, man, how could that even happen? And I didn't go to work full time again until August of that next year. And I ended up at an all boys school, a private Episcopal tuition free all boys school in Southeast Washington, DC. And it was all boys, it was all Black. And I realized after being a principal and an assistant principal at that point for 4 years that I didn't really have a sense of what education should look like for Black boys. And my principal at the time was pretty clueless. She grew up in a private school world. She went to predominantly white institutions her entire life. And this was an independent school. It was Episcopal, and the goal was to send our Black students to these upscale, ritzy white institutions. So she was looking at it from that perspective.
Yeah.
I was looking at it from the perspective of this is a school with boys, but it's not a school for boys. But I didn't know how to turn it into a school for boys. So I just went on this journey of self-discovery and just realized that all of that other time in education, I was being used as a pawn of white supremacy, like the special education referrals, the not questioning, the 88.
My name is Calvin Ellum. I'm a robotics teacher. I'm a student advocate, motivator, educator, but most importantly, I'm all about providing access and equal opportunities for my people. And I think education is that route. I teach in Detroit because it gives me opportunity to be a motivator, educator, and advocate to provide equal opportunities for young people. What motivated me to become a teacher was honestly just following my passion. I love science, I love scholars, I love kids, and I really think, me putting that together, teaching, really was that path. And so that's why I became a teacher. Educate, grow, elevate. To learn more, visit Teach313.
HD and the LD and the MR labels that we just, we slap them on Black boys like stickers on fruit. And none of those, all of those are political labels, is what I later found out as I started unpacking and started reading. But it literally started with, dude, you're saying all of these negative things about your boss, but you don't know. And you went to a historically Black college and you grew up listening to the quote unquote conscious rap music. So she has an excuse, you don't. And just kind of rediscovering and thinking about, what should a school for Black boys look like? And it just kind of sent me down a rabbit's hole of self-discovery. And it didn't take long it was like, I can't think of a good analogy, but it didn't take long to break the ice. But it's really hard to know when you're being complicit, when you're working hard and children are hugging you every day and the parents like you and you're going to their basketball games, their sporting events, the baptisms and things like that. It's like, how am I not supporting children? It's like you're not supporting children because you're not giving them the education that they need and deserve to solve problems in their community. You're giving them the education that's suitable for white children. And those are two distinctly different things. And that's why our kids fail, because we don't stand up and say, this is the education that Black children need, not the education that white children need.
Yeah, that was beautifully said, man. And right, because we have
I'm sorry, man. I know that was a lot.
No. I mean, I understand it, completely. I think but I think that's also like that double consciousness, that we develop, as people of the diaspora, of because some people do it unconsciously, like you said, but we consciously are conscious, right? And like, are we complicit, right? Or are we, anti-racist, right? And are we putting in systems in place to do that? But there's always gray area, right? Because as soon as you recognize that there's an injustice, you have to work into building a whole new system, and that's a process. And sometimes you still need that old system to kind of just carry it. So what do you think? Do we have to just destroy it and start all over? That revelation of like, so how many years were you in education when you recognized that revelation that you said? Like how long?
That was year 11. That was year 11. Yeah, that was, which is crazy, right? That was year 11. But to answer your question, in my book, the last chapter, I that's the question that I ask the reader to ponder. Like, this house is on fire. You wouldn't send anybody, you wouldn't send your worst enemy into a house that was literally ablaze. And this house is on fire with racism. So if I'm right, and I'm right, because I spent 212 pages in the book proving this point, I say, what are you going to do? Are you going to grab a fire extinguisher and try to put this blaze out? Or are you going to build a new home? And I specifically tell the readers, I am more interested in building a home. But you need to be very cautious about if you're going to attempt to build a new home, but you also need to be conscious and cautious if you stay. And, I have my beliefs about what happens in our schools that are not Black owned and operated with a Black agenda. I think a lot of the work that we do now around equity, it has its place. But one of the other things I say in the book, Calvin, is that I believe that the equity work can turn out to look a lot like the civil rights movement. The title of the book comes from an interview that Martin Luther King did
Yeah.
It was actually May 8th, 1967. He did an interview with NBC News, and it's on YouTube. I don't know if you saw it, but he's lamenting and reflecting on the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
And he's standing at the pulpit, and the guy is like on the ground holding up the microphone and speaking to him. But he said, yeah, he was like, we got some of this, right? We got a little bit of that, but this is really about economic justice. And he's really, King was a pretty eloquent person. He was never going to say, we were fooled. But I think he understood that they didn't get what they sought out to get. And for the hard work and the sweat equity and the pain and the suffering and the violence that so many people undertook, there was still so much more work to be done. And that's kind of how I feel about this quote unquote equity movement. We see lots of Black and brown people, specifically Black women, if you notice, working as equity officers in schools, in Fortune 500 companies, and in nonprofits. But we're not seeing any change to the structure of white supremacy.
Yeah.
It's still a power equation of white people on top and Black people on the bottom.
Right.
So if we're not very careful, we will look up in 2050 or 2045 and say, you know what? All of these diversity and equity and inclusion movements and positions, and we're still suffering with police genocide, right? We're still suffering with poor housing, miseducation, and we're still squabbling over voters' rights, right, and voter suppression and things like that. So, I don't think those things are going to be solved with Black people going to public or private schools, for that matter. It's going to happen it's going to happen if and when we take control of the education of our children, so we could talk about what are the agenda items that we want to focus on, and like, what is that going to look like for us? Because these are issues that we've been dealing with for, right, you fill in the blank. That's kind of how I see it going down. So I say get your friends together and start some schools. That's my reco. That's my recommendation.
Have you watched listen to the 8 Black Hands podcast?
You know what? I've listened to them a few times. I'm actually on a panel with Sharif tomorrow. Okay. And I said to him, yo, when we gonna connect, man? Because I was part of a conference this weekend. I was on another panel and he did the keynote. Yeah. And I was like, yo, son, when we gonna connect? He was like, we gonna connect, man. We gonna connect. So I got into a squabble with Chris because he think he's smart, which he is.
Chris is very smart.
Chris is brilliant.
He's very quote unquote militant in a positive way.
Chris is brilliant, but we got it. And I don't really do Twitter beefs, but we were talking about this notion of school choice. Mm-hmm. And I said, come on, and this is over Twitter, and things get lost in translation. But I said, it's not fair when you say school choice, when you have a charter school that Black people can send their children to, but the local public school is dilapidated. That's not choice. Like I'm in Montgomery County, and right, the local school here, the local middle and high school, they're IB schools, right? They're international baccalaureate programs. And if the parents said, you know what, how come we don't have a dual immersion program? The district is going to say, well, if you want that, you have to apply. Your kid has to get on a bus and go 4 miles this way. Yeah. That's school choice. If those parents default to this middle or high school, they're going to get a quality education. That's school choice, not a school that's paternalistically given to you under a fail event agenda of white supremacy. Come on, like.
Hello, how you doing? My name is Calvin Ellum, and I've been teaching for 5 years. I teach because I want to be an advocate, inspiration, and a motivator for my people. And most importantly, you know, I just want to give back.
The teacher has to be put on the pedestal like the Blake Griffin, like the Jay-Z's, you know, and be seen like that person is the ultimate holder of knowledge and the person that is going to be the leader. For some reason, when I see like a entertainer and a sports athlete in the position of like a leader and they're giving like a speech and they're like talking, I'm like, I'm supposed to be up there. Like, I went to school for 6 years and I studied quantum physics and you know what I'm saying? And all they got to do is kick a ball and entertain and all of this, praise and stuff, And so when I'm in the classroom, I have to like really let myself know that I'm not only an educator, I'm someone that's inspirational. I'm someone that's motivational. If I'm coming with an empathetic mindset, I'm like, okay, I have no idea, but I'm gonna give y'all the power, and y'all gonna teach me how to teach y'all.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
That
and
voice.
once you recognize that power and you give them that power, now you just become, instead of like a sage on the stage, you become a facilitator.
Taking away choices from Black people who obviously need choices. And that wasn't the point that I was trying to make. The point that I was trying to make is, what do we mean when we say choice? Because so many parents are still, when you think about school shuttering and schools closing, and new schools opening, new charters opening, some parents are still sending their children to the neighborhood public school, even though it is considered to be failing, because schools mean different things to different people, right? So it's like, well, we lived in this community for 13 years and my oldest son went there, so you're going to go there too. Even though the leadership is new, I know the building, I know the feel, that's where you're going to go. And I just think it's a more nuanced conversation than let's open a charter school, or a charter school is going to open, so that solves the problem. It's much more complex than that.
Yeah, I mean, even like Nicole Hannah-Jones work, she talks about how, even like some charter schools are increasing the disparity, because what they're finding is that a lot of these charter schools are overwhelmingly Black and Latino. And generally, she's saying that is increasing the segregation, because, you have that population, they're in that district, right? A whole lot of things change. And then she said this, she was like, after Brown versus Board, we've never had successfully integrated schools. And she said, you could tell by, if you look at the budget line for all the schools, right, even for like HBCUs and PWIs, and, you get into the high schools, middle schools, the lowest budget always goes to the, the most marginalized communities. And so it's her point, I think, is saying that, is that, charter schools are great, right? But they're not the solution. We have so many things, that we need to account for. But that's dope, man. Yeah,
Yeah, there's so many charter schools doing great things. There's so many charters doing great things. It becomes about those schools acquiescing to a Black agenda. That ends up being the conversation. Like, we want the Jalen Rose Academy to do X and Y and Z, right? We want this school to do X and Y and Z. And you can't open a school in our community without our permission. As a matter of fact, we're going to open a school in our community and we want it to look like this. I think that is the power of school choice. And I don't think school choice exists without that. So I got poo-pooed in the book by some of really my friends. We're like, yo, Des, you got beef with charter schools. We know you got fired by a charter school. I was like, dude, that's not it. It was them not being under a Black agenda. And I think the lack of control, the lack of community control of our schools is what hurts African Americans. So, I go in on private schools because those places are hotbeds of racism, particularly for Black girls, which
Really?
I didn't even, which I didn't even know. But what the data says is that quantitatively, is Black girls don't have an identity, and they end up getting cast off as the angry Black girl. They get over sexualized and over criminalized, whereas Black boys in these upscale private schools get typecast as an athlete, and that's a more positive identity marker.
That's accepted.
So you might not even, right? So Black kid in the hood might not even sniff being on a basketball team, but he's the sixth man off the bench at the private school he goes to, and he can hang his hat on that. So
Yeah, man. Yeah, I love what you talked about. Like, schools, like they can be Black targeted, right? I'm just using that as like kind of like what the Breakfast Club is, right? They're Black targeted, but it's not Black owned, right? That's the difference. That matters, right?
Yeah, it's like Popeye's chicken.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, Churches. You're in Detroit, so Church's chicken.
No, they got Popeyes here too, right on 8 Mile. That line going all out to 8 Mile, bro. They love that chicken over there, man.
Wait, what? 8 Mile and what? Help me out.
It's 8 Mile and last year, I think.
Oh wow, yeah, buddy. It's like, wait a minute. I remember my cousin, me and my cousin finding out that that Churches wasn't owned by African Americans. We were like, what?
Yeah.
You know how much money we spend here? We put more money into this place than we do our actual church.
That's real. That's real though. But I really, and I'm happy that she was able to go through that process and recognizing that and having peace in that. Because I can definitely, I know that for me, like that would have happened to me, I would have been devastated, but that's just a part of the game, and passion is real, you can tell. And I really appreciate, for what you do. So real quickly, man, just, talk about the book real quick again, Burning House, like, why should people buy this book, and, what's some cool things you got coming up?
Yeah, the book came out in February of 2020. The book is entitled The Burning House, Educating Black Boys in Modern America. And I wrote the book as a referendum on what African Americans need to do to take control of the education of our boys. That's one. Two, as I began writing the book, I had to talk about my complicity in harming Black children and not being conscious enough, right? We use the term woke, but I prefer the term consciousness, Cal, because it's a spectrum, right?
It is.
And you can, as opposed to being binary, where either you're awake or you're asleep.
I agree.
So having a conversation about my complicity and what I did to kind of go through that, I thought was really critical, so that other people can read and benefit from that 11 years, that 18 years of experience that I had thus far. So that was part two. But the other part of it that I think is really powerful is the conversations around instructional inequity and how we don't teach teachers how to differentiate, and we don't teach teachers what racism looks like in schools. So a teacher standing in front of a group of kids, being teacher-centered and giving information is a very Eurocentric concept. More specifically, that is the essence of Greek schooling, which is interesting because when they were learning from Egyptians didn't teach them that, right? That's something that they created on their own, which is fine. But as Paulo Freire called it, he was like, you're banking the information, and the teacher is pouring the information into the students as opposed to giving the students the opportunity to grapple with the information, to learn, to conversate, to question, and all of those different things. So breaking that instructional inequity, learning what different learning styles, different learning modalities. I jump into the 5th chapter of the book, Howard Gardner's different learning styles,
Mm-hmm.
and really talk about the importance of understanding brain-based differences between boys and girls, but also how we can better and more quickly identify students' learning styles, so that we can cater more to their needs. Because it's literally speaking French to someone who speaks English. You're not going to get through to them. So there are lots of other practical tips. But the other thing I would say is I break down education for teachers in the 21st century as a pedagogical fight and also a political fight. And that if teachers, that pedagogical fight is the standard to enter the game.
Yeah.
But you have to be invested in that political fight, and I call it firefighting. Just going off the analogy of fire, but Bettina Love calls it abolitionist teaching, and
Right.
Goldie Muhammad calls it criticality. My hero, Dr. Amos Wilson, calls it giving Black children the education that they need. So
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it, that political fight, I say we have to be involved in as teachers, because if we don't, we'll be having this conversation in 30, 40, 50 more years.
Man, you just said like three of my favorite, and Amos Wilson. Hold up, look.
Yeah.
I got the blueprint. You know how big that book is.
I got it right there, though. You go, if you go get yours, I'll go get mine, bro.
But it's I don't want. It's somewhere around here, but
No, he's my hero.
Yeah, because he was he was a psychologist, and so he was definitely able to give the great input as it relates to the mind, and he was a child psychologist, I believe, as well. So he did a lot of work with adolescents and awakening Black genius, and Black on Black violence. Amazing author. And you said abolitionist teaching, and I think of revolutionary suicide. Huey Newton. The difference between being a reactionary versus a revolutionary, right? Like recognizing that what Bettina Love says, like you are accepting the struggle of being you recognize that you're going to struggle, but just like Tupac said, right? You may not change the world, but you will, plant that seed that might do it.
In that one, yeah. And if I could say this, Calvin, because I know your time might be running short, but Dr. Chris Emden and Goldie, I don't mention those people in the book. And I did that purposefully because as that Martin Luther King interview inspired me, because the initial title of the book was going to be called The Work. And Wes Moore was coming out with a book called The Work. And I was like, I can't compete with Wes Moore. Not right now, at least. So I was like, okay, you gotta change the title. But I just started asking myself the question. I was like, what was Dr. King reading? He wasn't reading Chris Emden. Like who are these dudes reading? And when I talked about going down that rabbit hole, I was reading a lot of Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. I was reading a lot of Robert L. Williams, who is
Dr. Ben.
He's a G. That's my other hero. And then Dr. Raymond Winbush, and all of these people who were contemporaries. Like when we talk about a Dr. Goldie or Bettina Love, that's this generation. They just didn't have social media. So I tried to elevate their names and say, you can read Robin DiAngelo all you want, but long before Robert DiAngelo, there was Dr. Janice Helms. And she was one of the first people at a scholarly level to talk about racism and how it infected and impacted white people. And, I think that's one of the legacies of the book, is people have went through the recommended text and said, I've never heard of these people. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of part of the reason why I wrote it, because
Beautiful.
as part of my writing, it's really hard for me to read other people, because it's like if you're J. Cole, it's like I can't listen to Kendrick right now. Like I'm creating, but having those other revolutionary spirits in the background was just like fuel to my fire. So I think that's one of the other things that people have complimented me on, is it's giving them something else to read besides the Bettina Loves and the Dr. Goldies and all of these other greats that we have at our fingertips.
I know you read Kunjufu.
Kunjufu is my guy. I was on it's been a few months now, but I tried to get him to come to my school, and he was a principal. I was like, dude, you too expensive. He's like, man, I gotta feed. He's like, I gotta feed these grandkids. I was like, come on, man. And come to find out,
that all he need is a marker and a board. You'll boop 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 boop.
no, he's my guy, and there's no one. I was on a panel. I said, there's no one doing work in this space around Black boys who shouldn't be congratulating and really paying tribute to Dr. Kunjufu, because he was the guy on Donahue when he was getting chased out the parking lots, and they were booing him. Like he was the one soldier standing up saying, no, you guys are literally killing our sons, and you're doing it on purpose. And it's stood the test of time, because you can read his work now, and the data hasn't changed.
Exactly. It's gotten worse, probably.
The data has not changed. So shout out to the good doctor.
Yeah, man. Shout out to all the people with PhDs and y'all smart selves, man. But yeah, man. So this was a dope conversation, man. We got to talk about a bunch of my authors. I'm so happy I'm talking to another Black author, another Black educator, and a brother, man, who definitely understands what it is, man. And you listen to J. Cole, bro, man. I know your kids definitely love you, man. So what do you want people to get from the podcast, man? And any other things you got coming up?
You know, I would say to people listening to the podcast, don't be a follower, be a student. Those are the words of the immortal Jim Rohn. Don't be a follower, be a student. You don't have to believe anything I said. Just research it. Just research it for yourself. Be a student. Don't be a follower. And I think in terms of things I have coming up, I'm, in my consulting practice, working on a few equity audits for schools. But I'm going to be doing some work in some pretty big work helping Black and brown boys in in Dallas and in San Antonio. And I'm also I'm going to create an online course, a crash course for educating Black boys. So stay in tune to the website. I hope to launch that after the 4th of July. So yeah, stay tuned to the website, and I'm going to make it affordable. Because this is about education and information and transformation, not about finance.
And we're not giving stuff out for free, so you better pay us. I'm just playing.
No, as my man said, Fupame, F you pay me.
Shoot, man, we giving the game up, man. Give me my money, man.
No, it's to be sold, not to be told. But
exactly.
We're gonna make it in a way, because we know where teachers put their money. They put it in their classroom, and they put it in their rent. So like it's gonna be affordable, but it's gonna be transformative as well. So
yeah, man. Well, that's simplicity. I got my brother Desmond Williams coming through from Detroit. Now he in DMV doing amazing things, brother, man. He got an amazing book, Burning House. Please check that out. And Desmond, what's your social medias?
Yes, you can find me on Clubhouse, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nylinka. That's Nylinka, Nylinka. My website, particularly if you're interested in purchasing the book or being a part of the Black Boys Crash Course is nylinka.org. Again, that's NYLINKA. And you can find me on LinkedIn at Desmond Williams. But I'm super accessible. My information is on the website. If you need a thought partner, conversation about what's happening with your school, give me a call and set up a time to talk. Because our boys deserve the best that we can give them.
Thank you so much, Desmond. Appreciate you coming on the podcast, man.
Good brother. I appreciate you for all the work you're doing in the D, holding us down, because we need that intellectual capital. Like I said to you when we were in that room on Clubhouse, we need the intellectual capital.
Man.
And give me 6 or 7 years. I'm gonna have a school there. So it's only a matter of time.
Hit me up, man. I know.
So you can run it.
Yeah,